Now on to some NFL news. Dolphins running back Raheem Mostert will not play in Thursday night's game against the Buffalo Bills. Coach Mike McDaniel said Wednesday, leaving the team without its leading rusher from a season ago. Mostert was estimated to have missed all of the Dolphins' practices this week with a chest injury. The team didn't practice Monday and held walkthrough practices Wednesday and Tuesday. Running back Devon Aiken, who also missed Monday and Tuesday's practices with an ankle injury, but returned to the practice field on Wednesday. In terms of Acme's availability for Thursday games, McDaniel said, quote, "We'll see." Now on to some MLB news. Tampa Bay reliever Edwin Uceta was suspended 3 games and fined an undisclosed amount by MLB for unintentionally throwing at Nick Castellanos during Tuesday's game against the Philadelphia Phillies. MLB announced that Rays manager Kevin Cash has been suspended 1 game. It was unclear as of Wednesday afternoon whether Uceta will appeal the suspension. Now over to the one scoreboard for the MLB will hit today. Mets, big win against the Blue Jays, 6-2. That was your SportsCenter update from 600 ESPN El Paso.
From the 600 ESPN El Paso River Oaks Properties Schoolyard Sports Studio, here's Steve Kaplowitz and Adrian All
right, and with that, we welcome you back to the show here on Sports Talk. Good to have you back on this Wednesday afternoon. All right, I'm not sure what you have the board in right now, but is the board in the normal spot? Now let me see if I can hear that. There we go. That sounds much better. Much, much, much better. I love it. Alberto Dueta is with us. He's in the house. Is that Sebastian Perez Novato, or who's wearing that pinstripe shirt right now?
This is
that George?
This is a new intern. Yes.
Oh, George is here today. All right, very nice, man. Good to see you. I couldn't tell. All I saw were some pinstripes, and I remember he brought in the Chihuahuas pinstripe jersey today. I wonder if he was playing hooky today and went to the day game that started at 12 o'clock. Which, by the way, Chihuahuas won today, so good stuff. Happy they were able to take care of business and win a day game by the final score of 8-4 over Salt Lake. They doubled them up. So that means we're on until 6 tonight, and then at 6 o'clock, it'll be UTEP football with Scotty Walden and John Teicher going back to Dead Beach Brewery today and getting ready for that show. Means we've got 2 hours with you. We'll take you up till 6 o'clock. Jay Jaffe is going to join us, as he always does. Talk a little baseball and beer. We'll talk about some of those storylines that Alberto just brought up. And then Nick Whalen, who is the co-host of Jeff Erickson's podcast on RotoWire, is going to pinch hit for Jeff today in our 5 o'clock hour. So Nick Whalen's going to come on. He's going to talk a little fantasy football, and excited about that. So that's going to be happening in our 5 o'clock hour, and then out to Teish at Dead Beach and UTEP football coming up to begin our number 3, as we'll take you up from 6 to 7 o'clock. By the way, I listen to your Sports Center. Couple things. Number 1, I love how you read the story and how they called that Uceta pitch unintentional. That was the most intentional 96-mile-an-hour just drill job I've seen in a while. The guy just gave up like 4 or 5 big hits. The inning exploded on him yesterday as Philadelphia just blew that game open. And if you think that was an unintentional pitch that happened to hit Nick Castellanos, you're crazy. That was as intentional as it gets. And the funniest part is, after the game, he called it an off-speed pitch that hit him. It was a 96-mile-an-hour heater right into the hip. I mean, that pitch drilled him, or in the thigh. Anyway, and you want to know something else? Bryce Harper could have killed that pitcher yesterday. Could have killed him. He was in after the incident. Now, the only deal is this. If Harper would have connected, he would have blindsided him, meaning the pitcher would have not even seen him coming. So the good news is he didn't do that. But had he done that, oh my God, it would have been World War III out there with those two teams. So that's crazy. Also, the storyline with the Met win today over the Blue Jays that you didn't hit on was Bowden Francis had a no-hitter going into the 9th inning in this game. Toronto's starting pitcher threw 8 no-hit innings, led 1-0. They trotted him out there, and what do you think happened to lead off the 9th? How about, a solo shot to tie the game for the New York Mets by Francisco Lindor. So Lindor hits a home run, knocks Francis out of the game in the 9th, and then the Mets go on to win it by a 6-2 final to take the series by scoring 6 times in the 9th off of Blue Jay reliever Chad Green. Green came in, walked 3, gave up a hit, and essentially once he left, the Mets just destroyed the Blue Jays in that 9th inning with 6 runs. And it's ironic because they were being no-hit to start that 9th inning. So big win for the Mets today to come back after that loss.
You got a feel for the Blue Jays here. That is hands down the worst way to lose in any baseball game. You're throwing a no-hitter. You feel great about your pitching and where it's putting you in a position late in the game, and then a phenomenal athlete like Francisco Lindor comes in and has his way, knocks you out of the game. That's really deflating. That's the word I'm going to use. It's deflating for the Blue Jays. Let's see how they bounce back.
Yeah, that's going to be the interesting thing. You're right. Let's see how they bounce back. As for the Mets are in the playoff hunt right now. They're battling the Braves, the Padres, and the Diamondbacks. There's only going to be 3 wild card spots in 4 teams. So, yeah, they are all trying to get the same thing. So that is going to be really interesting. Meanwhile, I heard this story about Devon Achane, and Achane's got an issue right now, and we'll see if he ends up playing for Miami. That's going to be another interesting storyline at this point in time because I'd like him when healthy. I do believe Achane's one of the best running backs, young backs in the league, but hey, see if he's going to be cleared for the Dolphins this week.
Yeah, that's a huge loss if they don't have them. I really like the way they use them. I think that the versatility that they bring with their backs and their wide receivers, the Dolphins, I think that's really what gives a lot of their players a lot of value, especially in fantasy. You know, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, those 2 guys are great. And then now Mostert and Achane. I know that both of those guys went really high, so it'll be interesting to see how guys in the fantasy world, how they react and who gets to go here.
You're right. Absolutely right. So Jay Jaffe is going to join us here in a little bit. Excited about getting that started. But I got to play a little audio for you since we only have 2 hours today. Only have 2 hours. I want you to listen in to Joe Golding, head coach of the UTEP Miners, the men's basketball team. This is some good stuff because Adrian posted this about a little less than an hour ago when Joe met the media prior to the start of today's shoot-around and practice. So I think that's also important. And by the way, if you check out Adrian's post, he's got Devin Barnes, and he's got some other great stuff as well. But here it is, Joe Golding earlier about an hour ago when he talked to Adrian about the non-conference schedule and also what to expect from his Miners this season.
Scheduling is up there with recruiting. It's one of the hardest things you have to do now in college basketball. It's just really tough. Obviously, unfortunate that we couldn't get the Lola Marymount game back here. I'm not happy about that at all. They choose to push it to another year, which caused us to try to scramble on some things. But we're able to finalize it. I think we're playing some really good teams. I think that swing. It's all important, but I think that one swing where I think we go to UC Santa Barbara and then Vegas, where we're going to play 4 really good teams. I think it's a good swing. You obviously have the Sun Bowl tournament here that I think is going to be really challenging and good. We got Coach Gillespie coming back here, which I think will be exciting and a lot of fun. And then obviously we got a conference slate that's going to be really tough.
And Louisville that you guys have on the
Yeah, I forgot about them, right? They're going to be really good. Coach Kelsey, brand new coach. Obviously Louisville's been down the last couple years, but obviously Coach Kelsey's brought a ton of energy to the program, a ton of transfers, players. I think they'll end up being a top 25 program, so it'll be a great opportunity for us to go play them.
How do you think the schedule is going to challenge you this year, Coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think every year is challenging. Every schedule is challenging, number one, to put together, but number two, to go out and compete and play. What I like about it, man, is I think we're playing a lot of good teams with net scores from last year. I think we're playing a lot of competitive programs that are going to be good this year. We're going to be challenged. So I think overall, top to bottom, it might be one of the toughest schedules we've put together. Maybe not name pop, but when you look at their basketball programs and what these teams have done over the last couple of years, I think it's a really, really good schedule.
How do you compare, just looking forward to this season, compared to previous years, even prior to you?
Yeah, obviously really excited because we're the guys we got back, right? And so we've set the bar high with the way we finished in March. But just like I've told our guys the whole day, just because we finished in March doesn't mean we're going to be great this year. And we have 9 guys back, right? There's a lot of work that has to be done. We've got to trust the process. It's a different team. And so, there's things we've got to get better at. You and I have talked about it a ton. In the offseason, we've got to become a better three-point shooting team. We've got to take care of the basketball better. We've got to learn to win on the road to become a great team that we want to become. And so we've got guys back, which gives me a comfort level, but we got to be able to go out and do it as well.
The thing I love about Joe Golding more than anything is he is about as transparent and honest as you're going to get, especially the start of that interview when he opened up about Loyola Marymount and what really upset him, and probably why that schedule just got released today rather than weeks ago, is he wanted that return game this year, and they pushed it back, which it bothered him because it's thrown off his schedule and put him in a spot to where they're kind of scrambling to fill a game. And he wasn't shy about mentioning that. And, look, Loyola Marymount played UTEP last year. It was supposed to be a home and home. And UTEP started on the road. And that's the danger of these 1-for-1s, is that when you don't start at home and you got to return it the following year, you hope that the school that you signed the deal with is not going to put you out. Now, what I don't understand is when you've got a 1-for-1 like this, why, when the first game wasn't set up, did they not already plan that return date the following season? I don't understand why suddenly Loyola Marymount decided they wanted to change the date, which threw UTEP's schedule for a loop. And as Joe Golding mentioned at the start of that conversation with Adrian in the media today, really threw them off. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, you know what, Coach? I think he identifies that the fan base wants the return of big programs and big games to the Don Haskins like they had back in many years before this. So I think that his words are to soothe fans, but the question that comes to my mind is, are these agreements contract agreements, or are they just verbal agreements where a team can decide to push it back and not do it whenever you guys said verbal agreement, or is it a contract agreement? And lastly, it's you talked about how upfront he is. It's good that he's not deceitful like a lot of other coaches sometimes like to be.
Let's put it this way, regarding the agreements that are made. Normally a 1-for-1 when a contract is signed just mentions that a game will be played during one season and they return the fall together and schedule it out. Again, I don't know why this is being forced to either next season or the following. I don't know when this game is going to be returned, but it stinks because, when you play a team like Loyola Marymount in their place and you expect a home game the following season, only to find out that they try to change it up and now have to force it to another season, that's not good. I want to replay that answer again from Joe to start it off when he talks about the schedule, because I do think that it's kind of interesting when he brings up immediately that situation with Loyola Marymount. You can hear from his tone just how frustrated that he was in the process. Here it is again.
Now in college basketball, it's just really, really tough. Obviously, unfortunate that we couldn't get pushed it to another year, which caused us to try to scramble on some things.
So there he says they chose to push it to another year. Normally, when 1-for-1s are made, there are specific years in the contract when those games have to be played. Now, I don't know if Loyola Marymount breached it. I don't know how that's going to work. Normally, they don't have outs to move it to other years, but maybe when the contract was signed, it said 2024, 25, or 25, 26. I don't know how that contract was drawn up, but you could hear just in the frustration of Joe's voice when he talked about how he wanted that game here, and they've had to scramble to fill it as a result of Loyola Marymount moving it to another season.
That's definitely a really difficult thing to deal with, especially in today's day and age of college basketball. So I really want to give props to Joe of reacting as quickly as they did to try to fill the game.
Scheduling sucks. Let me tell you something. Scheduling is bad. And here's the thing, too, okay? You always want to get in a home and home the first game at home. Because then you don't have to worry about that return. You'll return it, you'll go on to your game, and you'll play the following season. But you know that at least if you start it off at home, you're getting them. They're not going to back out or push it out or something like this. That's the whole deal. You want to make sure that everything's on good faith, and you're not finding now that somebody's going back on their word and scheduling it for another year. So, all right. Anyway, we've got a lot to cover on the show today. We've got 2 hours with you till 6 o'clock. Jay Jaffe next, talking baseball and beer right after Charlie One, who I guess will not be joining us yet, but we do have a traffic update that will be coming up. Just like that. He's listening in. I love it. So Charlie's ringing in. We've got him next, and here he is with our first traffic update of the afternoon. Back here on Sports Talk as we continue 20 past the hour. Time to talk a little baseball and beer with this man. He is Jay Jaffe, who joins us weekly from FanGraphs.com. And a lot to cover with Jay. But, Jay, before we get started, today being 9/11, you living in New York, and I'm pretty sure I've asked you this over the years, but were you already in the New York area 23 years ago on this day when we were attacked, and we all know what had happened on that particular morning in New York and D.C. and, of course, in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I moved to New York in February of 1995, so I'd been here for just about six and a half years when it happened. So, yeah, I remember it vividly. I remember, for some reason, deciding I still needed to go to work that morning and then walking home all the way down 6th Avenue. You could see... You still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Sorry about that. My phone just beeped here. I don't know why. Yeah, I remember walking home from work, which was about 2 miles, and just being like having the black pillar of smoke from the World Trade Center right in my field of vision the entire time, and
wow.
And it was wild. And I was living just below 14th Street, and it seemed like for at least a couple days there was no traffic down there at all. It was a ghost town. It was wild. It was surreal, I think, is probably the word I would use. And I don't spend a lot of time thinking about that day and that time so often, because we're just kind of saturated with it here.
Sure.
In the city when it comes around. But it was obviously a chilling moment and something I'll never forget.
Well, I know a lot of us were here at that time. I was still doing this back then, and I remember like it was yesterday what we were doing as a radio station, covering that from the moment it happened. But I also remember the city of New York rallying. I remember the Mets and Yankees later that year. The Mets came close to going to the playoffs. The Yankees go to the World Series. And, of course, the memorable series in 2001 against the Diamondbacks. And now we fast forward 23 years today on 9/11. The Mets nearly got no-hit by Bowden Francis in the Toronto Blue Jays. He came one inning from trying to get it done. We just lost Jay. So we could try to get Jay back. He's having that along, too. Maybe Jay can also help you out with that there. But, yes, we'll get Jay back in a moment and get a chance to talk to him about that. But it's a crazy situation today. And I'm sure one of the things that Jay will talk about is just how close the Blue Jays were today to no-hitting the New York Mets before the Mets were able to rally with 6 in the ninth, which, again, a big, big win for a team that is trying desperately to get into that wild card race and get that last spot, or perhaps even higher if they can pass a red-hot San Diego and Arizona team that just keep winning. So it's a very good storyline that we've got right now in the National League, and hopefully we'll get Jay back here in a moment and be able to continue that conversation. Okay, so Jay, I was talking about the Mets being no-hit by Bowden Francis through 8 today, but they score 6 in the ninth. as Francisco Lindor got it started, knocked Francis out. Then the Mets tacked on 5 more. Huge win for a team that needed it in the worst way possible after David Peterson got batted around yesterday, and the Mets dropped that second game to the Blue Jays. Jay, you there? Okay. I'm going to see. He's having phone issues right now. So I'm going to send you his cell and see if we can just go from that. So I'm going to actually see if he can just call the hotline. So we're going to work on this and get Jay back, because yes, he's definitely having some issues with his landline. So we'll be having Jay call into the hotline here in a second, and then we'll bring him back and we'll go from there. So okay, looks like we've
5.
got
it's on
here.
5.
I got it. So perfect. All right, Jay, I've got you back. Appreciate you calling in, but let's talk about the Mets and the significance of their win today over the Blue Jays.
Yeah, I turned it on in the 7th inning here because I wanted to see if Francis could get the no-hitter, knowing that the Mets are playing with some a little bit of desperation because they've fallen behind the Braves once again. And boy, Lindor just smoked that ball. He's had so many big hits for the Mets down the stretch here. I mean, I could thoroughly understand why. He's going to get strong support in the MVP voting. I mean, he's ahead of Shohei Ohtani in the FanGraphs version of wins above replacement. The reference version has Lindor's spectacular defense to go with a lot of clutch hits. He's the big reason why the Mets have turned their season around, and they're battling now with the Braves, and they actually lead in the third wild card spot. The Braves are very bad now, and they just lost one of their best starters, Ronaldo Lopez, to the injured list for the second time in as many months. So this is going to be a fight down to the wire for those teams.
It really is. Braves get the Nats tonight. Max Fried going up against Jake Irvin. So that's a big one for them. Of course, the Padres also in that mix right now. And Michael King has been terrific for them all season long. One of their best starters. It's a really good matchup going up against Seattle and Brian Wu. But the Diamondbacks are doing it again. They're clobbering the Rangers today 14-4. Diamondbacks and Padres have been terrific. Like you said, Braves are just trying to get there with all their injuries. The Mets have been a great story here. Look, we've got 4 teams that are all very interesting playoff teams in the National League, and only 3 of those 4 teams are going to get in by the end of this month.
Yeah, it's we had a lot of winnowing of the field in August to the point where there's really not a lot of middle ground there between those guys and the next closest team, the Cubs, who've climbed to 5 games above 500, but are still 4.5 back from the last spot in the wild card race. So, it's going to be the jockeying for position here. None of these teams can afford to go into a slump because that's going to put them on the outside potentially here, or at least put them in a bad position as far as seeding goes.
That's so true. And by the way, for those of you wondering right now, the Phillies have the best record in the National League. The Dodgers right behind them. Then comes Milwaukee. His Diamondbacks and Mets, along with the Braves, all kind of neck and neck. It's fun to see just how much parity is there near the top of that National League so far this season. Phillies got a big win yesterday. By the way, the Castellanos beaning, they can call that one an accident all they want. I saw the inning that led up to that pitch, and Jay, I thought that Bryce Harper had a really good set of comments, and that is, guys are throwing so hard today that when you hit somebody purposely, hit them with an off-speed pitch. Don't hit them with a 96-mile-an-hour heater against your thigh. That could definitely do some damage.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody should be hit purposely. I mean, these are dangerous things. It's would even accidentally can cause some. Friday when Teoscar Hernandez got hit on the ankle for the Dodgers and had to leave the game and missed 4 games, and he's back in the lineup tonight. It's just, there's just so much at stake for these guys. We've seen, a lot of broken hands, a lot of broken wrists. Jeff McNeil just went down due to a broken wrist, and that was like on a curveball trying to bunt. Even a breaking ball could do damage. So, don't try to hit anybody. It's not cool.
It's true. But look, and for you, one of the soapboxes we could fire you up about is the unwritten rules of baseball that's been going on forever. And, whether guys get hit purposely or not, they're always going to deny it and say the ball slipped. But yesterday could have been dangerous. And I mentioned this before I even brought you on. I credited Bryce Harper. He could have blindsided Uceta yesterday and incited a riot in Philadelphia if he wanted to. And luckily, as he said, was that dirty that would potentially cause a huge suspension and really take him out of the lineup. So happy about that. You're right, though. The biggest thing is this. Guys throw so hard right now that when you get hit, there is a really good chance you could get hurt, seriously hurt, from even with protection.
Yeah, it's just, I know hit rates are up, and I know part of it is, players are now using padding. They are better protected. They want to be able to grab that plate and get that advantage for being able to get those pitches on the outside and not get put. There's a price, and it's a lot of give and take, and you do hate to see anybody get hurt in the midst of it, because that does not help the game at all.
Jay Jaffe with us here on Sports Talk as we continue approaching the bottom of the hour. You wrote about Justin Verlander yesterday and how right now he does not look like a postseason option for the Astros. And I think that's a really good topic to kind of build on from here, because as the Astros go into the postseason as one of those teams that is going to try to, go all the way into the World Series, you look at their rotation right now, Jay. Framber Valdez has been very good this season. After a terrible start, Hunter Brown has been good. You've got the Ronel Blanco story. Spencer Arrighetti has even had his moments, although the blow-ups scare you, especially if that's going to be in the postseason. And then comes Justin Verlander, who is supposed to be the leader of this rotation, and now you kind of wonder, if you're Houston, what do you do with him come postseason?
Yeah, I mean, you've also got Yusei Kikuchi, who's pitched very well since coming over from Toronto. I mean, they're using a six-man rotation, and it's you've got Blanco is in uncharted territory innings-wise, and Arrighetti has just passed his previous career high in innings. So you boil that down, that leaves you four starters. But Verlander is he has not pitched competitively the last few starts. He's been just rocked for, I think, 17 runs and 17 2/3 put out there. He knows he has to be better. I'm not gonna rule him out. Even at 41, I'm not going to say this is the end of the line for him. Certainly, it could be if he wanted it to be. But I still think that there's enough there. He misses enough bats to know that he could still fool hitters some of the time. It's just a matter of finding the right weapons. And I know his pitching coach said that the slider was better on Sunday than it had been in his last few starts. So if he can get his command together, he can be that fourth starter for them. But this is not a guy who's going to be pitching game one anymore, at the very least. And it wouldn't surprise me if he gets bypassed for that postseason start. I don't think it would surprise him one bit either. He knows where he stands right now, and he'll be the first to tell you that the Astros have better options right now.
Jay Jaffe talking baseball, and in a little bit he'll give us his Bear Pick of the Week recommendation on the program. Let's stay AL right now. The Yankees and Orioles are in a very tight race. In fact, right now the Yankees have a half-game lead over the O's. Both teams with 83 wins. The Yankees just have one fewer loss right now to have that half-game lead. You wrote a week ago about how the Yanks' refusal to open the door for Jason Dominguez could prove costly. Maybe Brian Cashman read your story and decided it was time, because they have now given Dominguez the opportunity to play. And how ironic that on his first day back, Alex Verdugo has his biggest day in a while, a guy that has been mostly a disappointment for the Yankees. And I wonder, will there be enough time for Dominguez to be that kind of an X factor like a lot of Yankee fans hoped when he was returning from the injured list and spending all that extra time rehabbing in AAA?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why you want him up for the better part of the month here, is to give him to see enough difference in the pitching to make the adjustments he needs to make. This is a guy who's got 11 major league games under his belt and Tom John surgery. late last year, hitting 4 home runs in a flurry. The first one was against Verlander in his first plate appearance, now that I think about it. The Yankees are still looking for that mix behind and ahead of Aaron Soto, and they've had some better contributions from Gleyber Torres and Giancarlo Stanton and Austin Wellesley. Kind of a fan offense. They do lead the American League in scoring, do lead the Major League in varsity plus, our production stat. A lot of that is just being driven by the 2 best hitters on the planet. And some days it's lean. So yeah, they've got to hope that Dominguez and can help them out. In terms of development on this last couple weeks of the season, the AAA season is only 2 more weeks. So has to watch and learn in some games. I think that's okay. The Yankees just have to give themselves the best chance to win every night. And, if that's with Verdugo on some nights, if there's certain types of pitchers he sees well, and if that's with Dominguez on some nights, better pitchers that he's got a chance against, that's the way that Aaron Boone's got to play it.
Jay, what do you have coming up on FanGraphs later this week?
Well, I was at the ballpark last night in the cheap seats drinking beer and watching the Yankees get thoroughly dismissed. This morning I started looking at what that guy said about his performance. He was dominant. 7 shutout innings, 3 hits, all singles, 12 strikeouts. And I think the Weavers added been shut out, extra base hits or walks, and struck out 14 times or more in their history. So, writing about what has turned Seth Lugo from kind of a fringe swingman type to a guy who looks to me like he's probably going to be a top 3 finisher in the Cy Young.
Yeah, Seth Lugo pitched for the Padres last year, and actually, believe it or not, had a nice year. I mean, I know he only won 8 games, but in 26 starts, I think that was kind of when the transformation. Padres were the first team to bring him back to the rotation since he was with the Mets early in his career, about 7 years ago. And, I mean, truthfully, Seth Lugo is one of the better stories in Major League Baseball this year. 16 wins, an ERA under 3, and he's doing it all with the Royals.
Yeah, and he has expanded it such that he throws 9 different pitches now. And he just, thoroughly baffled the Yankees last night with his kitchen sink approach. Got called strike to more than half the hitters, or to half the hitters he faced, and went 0-2 on something like 14 of the 24 hitters he faced. It was just a dominant performance, even though the guy's throwing low mid-90s at best. Just great command of a broad arsenal that just keeps the opposing teams off balance, and really impressive stuff.
All right, so let's get to the beer pick of the week, Jay. What are we going to get a chance to talk about this week?
Okay, this one is from Threes Brewing. This is their lowbrow, B-R-A-U, as opposed to their highbrow, B-R-A-U. Their highbrow is their Oktoberfest beer. Their lowbrow, which I think I actually prefer right now, it's probably my favorite beer of theirs, it's a Helles lager, comes in at 4.6% ABV. It is a nice German-style lager with just a little bit of a hint of maybe citrus to it. And it's just a really crisp, crushable beer. And I got some last week, and I'm like, man, I should have gotten more of this stuff. This is great. So really enjoying it.
Good stuff, Jay. Appreciate the conversation. We'll do it again right back with you next week.
All right, sounds great, Steve. Thanks.
Jay Jaffe, folks, from FanGraphs.com as we continue. 39 now past the hour. A lot more in store for you. Stay with us. Sports Talk continues. 600 ESPN El Paso. Back here on Sports Talk as we continue. 505-6009, our telephone number if you want to get in. 505-6009. By the way, I mentioned the Bowden Francis no-hitter by allowing the leadoff home run to Francisco Lindor in the 9th inning. Do you know this is now the second time in his last 4 starts that Francis lost a no-hit bid by allowing a leadoff home run in the 9th? twice in his last 4.
That's horrible. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. I know that I don't know how pitchers really come back from this or back after a performance like that where you're doing so well and then it's, I hate to say it like this, but taken away from you right there at the end.
Well, he grooved that pitch. It was like a 92-mile-an-hour fastball that did not move, and Lindor just deposited it in the right field stands. I mean, that's simply put, that's what happened. And then same thing happened with Taylor Ward when he had the Angels no-hit 18 days ago, and then the 9th inning, he did the same thing. So, yeah, it's tough. I mean, listen, he's been great, though. I mean, since he's come back this season, Bowden Francis has been one of the stories of the Blue Jays rotation for all you Blue Jay fans out there listening. So you never know if there's a few of you, and he's been terrific. But it's a shame. Just imagine that you're 3 outs away from making history, and not only do you give up the tying home run, you lose the game, and that's what happened.
Yeah, it's going to sting for a while, but I think this really just speaks to the volatility of the pitcher position. All it takes is one, and the game's, I hate to say it, completely out of your hands. So it's really just a good example as to how things can change and how fast they can change in the game of baseball.
By the way, we only have so far 4 no-hitters this season. Only 4. So, and you think about this, we did have that Cubs combined no-hitter when Shota Imanaga and then a pair of Cubs relievers no-hit the Pirates. But, you know, there's only been 326 of these in the history of Major League Baseball. And then you look at the Blue Jays a little further and you realize that how many Blue Jays no-hitters have been broken up in the 9th inning since Dave Stieb threw a no-hitter in 1990? Well, you've had 6 of them. And the last 2 came from Francis. You had David Cone, who was in the 9th inning in 1995 for the Blue Jays when that was broken up. Roy Halladay, 3 years later in 1998, I believe August 8th of 2010, and then the 2 Bowden Francis opportunities, August 24th and here today on September 11th. That's what's even crazier, that it's happened to the same guy twice in 18 days. And, for the Blue Jays, it's only happened a total of 6 times in the last 34 years. But that poor guy has had to deal with that twice in 4 starts.
Brutal. And I know that there's really a neat tidbit between the the Roy Halladay one and the Dave Stieb one. Dave Stieb was in attendance there when Roy Halladay's is ruined. He's in the bullpen and he catches the home run. He catches a home run that ends Roy Halladay's no-hit game, and it's just really like one of those things that it's a neat story in the game of baseball.
Yeah, it is. It always good storylines, and that's something we find. By the way, speaking of storylines, how about the fact that we've got 4 days left for home baseball for the Chihuahuas? And after today's day game, all we have left is tomorrow night, Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday afternoon, and that's it. They go back on the road next week, but to see them in person, you only have 4 more opportunities after today.
Yeah, it's sad that it's coming to an end. I know a lot of Chihuahuas fans from the city that they love to go to the games. They'll go to several a week. I try to get myself out there to at least one a week, and I've done so for, I'd say, 90% of the homestands. So I'll be out there for sure on Sunday.
So you're going to go Sunday for the last game?
Yeah, I want to go to
game.
Sunday.
Yeah,
it's gonna be brutal.
Well, I mean, how hot it's supposed to be? Like in the high 80s, I think is what I saw. Let me double check here and see. The forecast is for Sunday, 93. Oof. 93 and sunny.
Yeah, that's brutal.
Doesn't cool off until next week. So, yeah, that's and remember, I mean, when you're dealing with 93 degrees this time of year, I almost feel like you're right in the sun during the day, don't you? I mean, that's the tough part too.
Yeah, you're getting extended periods of time. That really is really physically draining. You got to hydrate right.
Yeah, but it's the last home game. You got to be there for it, right? That's exactly. Just the key. You can't miss that. So I don't blame you. I might be joining you at the ballpark and going that day too. That's the only hard part on Sunday is football. So if you go to watch the Chihuahuas, and you're basically going to be at the ballpark during the early games and perhaps the first half of the late game for week 2 of the NFL.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where if you don't have access to the West Star Club, you are at a disadvantage. You will be missing the games. You have to see if your favorite team is playing at that time to see if you want to go out there on a Sunday.
Yep, that's right. But a lot of fans. I feel like they'll be good. They'll be a good crowd, healthy crowd on Sunday for the last home game of the season.
Yeah, I think that people they'll be pressured by the fact that this is the end of baseball. There'll be, I'm sure, a bunch of people who realize, wait, I haven't gone to a game all season, and the Chihuahuas are about to never play for another blank month. So no, yeah, I hope people feel the urge or the need to go, and that it fills up at least a little bit. I know that my friend Jack tells me there's only about 10 or under 10 sellouts a year.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. There aren't too many. Meanwhile, let me check Twitter and X and get that in. All right, everybody's talking about how interesting. Everybody's talking about the Joe Golding Pay Dirt Pete shirt that he was wearing during his interview when Adrian mic'd him up. It's like just a very simple black T-shirt, but there's a giant white Pay Dirt Pete spinning a basketball on his finger. Every Miner fan that's watched that video wants that shirt.
Yeah, it's the tale as old as time. Is you see some cool UTEP merch and you know that you can never have it, and that's extremely disappointing. So that's what I try to tell people, is that you're never going to really attain this. And then the other part is UTEP athletics as a whole has been shifting to like black and white as their primary colors for some reason. So you'll see a lot of interns or different athletic members with a black Adidas shirt or polo long sleeve, and it'll just say white. It'll just say UTEP. And it's super clean. Black and white is it goes with everything. I love it.
Do you like it more than the blue and orange and white? Because I still think that shirt a year ago that you have is the baby blue, that throwback Pay Dirt Pete shirt. That's still one of my favorite looks.
It's my favorite. So if you're going to go and start embracing black, we'll make it available to the public and let them buy it and help you. They won't hurt your pockets, that's for sure.
All right, we're going to do a deep dive into the UTEP basketball schedule when we come back to lead off hour number 2. That was released today. We'll go through the games, the difficult ones, the home games, the road games. We'll get to all that as we continue. It's Sports Talk here, 600 ESPN El Paso. All right, from the 600 ESPN El Paso, River Oaks Properties, Schoolyard Sports Studios, we are back here with hour number 2 of the program. We've got George, our new intern, here for the fall. We've got 2 interns this semester. It's great. Sebastian Perez Nevado and George. We've got Alberto Dueta, who was taking over the show. As we told you last week, Adrian off on Wednesdays here in the fall. So you've got me with you right now for the next hour. That's right, because we're going to do a little fantasy talk here coming up to begin in our 5 o'clock hour when we hook up with not Jeff Erickson this week, but we've got Nick Whalen, who is Jeff's radio and podcast co-host. It's going to be covering for him today, so excited about having Nick on the show with us from rotowire.com. We'll talk some fantasy with Nick and get your thoughts on that as well. Always a lot of good fantasy football conversation coming in, so we'll do that here in just a little bit. But before we do, let's talk about the story today that dropped earlier this morning, UTEP's 2024-25 basketball schedule. All right, now we know that CUSA released their league schedule back in July. The Miners put together 13 non-conference games to go along with the 18 conference games, so we are now dealing with a 31-game schedule. As far as their tournaments go, we already know about the West Star Don Haskins Sun Bowl Invitational, December 20th and 21st. In addition to that, the Miners will play in the Ball Dogs Classic in Vegas, November 25th through the 27th. So I'm looking at the schedule, and here are your home games. All right, let's just do that. We'll go through the home games first. November 4th, the Miners are going to play Sol Ross at the Haskins Center. That's a Monday. Then on Tuesday, November 12th, they're going to host UT Permian Basin at the Haskins Center. That's it for November. They do have the Vegas tournament, and they also have UC Santa Barbara on November the 20th. Okay? Then, on December the 7th, the Miners will be taking on Seattle at the Haskins Center. So that's Seattle, December 7th at the Don Haskins Center. 9 days later, on Monday, December 16th, Billy Gillespie and Tarleton State will be here at the Don if I'm not mistaken, this is Billy's first return to the Don Haskins Center since he was coaching the Miners back in the 03-04 and 04-05 seasons. So Billy Gillespie, Tarleton State, and the Miners coming up here on the 16th. Then, 4 days later, on Friday, December 20th, Jackson State will be here at the Haskins Center. So you've got Tarleton State on a Monday, Jackson State on Friday, December 20th. The next day is the West Star Don Haskins Sun Bowl Invitation. So you've got Akron and Yale. That's the 20th and 21st. My apologies. Jackson State will be the first day of the Haskins Invitation, and then the 21st they play the winner of Akron and Yale. So that's how that will go. So you've got that happening as well. It's interesting, by the way. I can't remember the last time the West Star Don Haskins Sun Bowl Invitation was held on a Friday and a Saturday, which I like because, again, two weekend dates in December before the holidays. So hopefully, people won't be traveling at that point. They'll get a nice crowd and get a chance to watch the tournament. Then, Saturday, December 28th, UTEP will play Northern New Mexico at the Haskins Center, and then they start in with conference play. As far as their road games, let's talk about the road games. November 9th, Saturday, Utah Valley. That's going to be in Orem, Utah. Utah Valley will be their first road game on November 9th, 5 days after Sul Ross. Then, we mentioned the UC Santa Barbara game. That's going to be Wednesday, November 20th. They follow that up with Monday, November 25th, and Tuesday, the 26th, along with Wednesday, the 27th, in Vegas at the Vegas Ball Dogs Classic. So the Ball Dogs Classic will feature San Jose State on Monday, the 25th, Long Beach State on Tuesday, the 26th, and UNC Greensboro on Wednesday, the 27th. So they get 3 games in 3 days, which also will be really interesting to see. And then the Miners roll into conference play when that starts in January. The big one is also Louisville. The Miners will take on the Louisville Cardinals on Wednesday, December 11th. So if you're looking to make that marquee road trip and you want to go check out one of the great basketball programs, UTEP, Louisville, Wednesday, December 11th, and that's going to be in Louisville, Kentucky. So, and that is the only road game in the month of December for UTEP. That's it. They've got the home game on the 7th, the road game in Louisville on the 11th, Tarleton State on the 16th, Jackson State and the Sun Bowl tournament on the 20th and 21st, and Northern New Mexico on the 28th. And then they begin conference play with 3 at the Haskins Center. La Tech on the 2nd of January, Sam Houston on the 4th, New Mexico State on the 11th. They don't hit the road until January 16th at Liberty. They've got a Liberty FIU trip. That's going to be their first road trip on January 16th and 18th.
Do you think that homestand works in their favor or against them? That first one where they play La Tech, Sam Houston, and New Mexico State.
Completely in their favor. Completely in their favor. In fact, you might want to say that, I've seen them have to open up with 3 on the road. I love the fact they open up with 3 at home. And then they'll be road heavy after that. But you know what? It's not bad. In fact, I'm looking at how it's broken up. They get Jacksonville State and Kennesaw State on the 23rd and 25th of January at home. FIU Liberty on the 13th and 15th of February. And then Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee on the 27th of February and the 1st of March. So, but it's all right. I mean, to me, I love the fact that they will start off with La Tech, Sam Houston, and New Mexico State at home before they have to hit the road to take on Liberty and FIU. So I'm all for that. In fact, they're going to have so many home games between December 7th and January 11th. That's going to be your sweet spot for UTEP.
Yeah, it's definitely time to get out there and get to know them, get to watch them. So I'm definitely excited for the start of basketball. I think one of the interesting things about the schedule that I like to see here is you see how it's structured with the proximity to NMSU in mind. So like 2 teams will come. And then, so we have Liberty on the 16th of January.
Yep.
And then they go over on the 18th. They play NMSU. And FIU, who was on the 16th at NMSU, they come over here and they play us. So I was saying this last year to a couple of people on Minor Vision. I think that's really important, the fact that teams have to come out here. They stay in the area for a prolonged period of time, and they have to play NMSU and then us, or then us and then MSU. I think that adds to the road factor for them. And that, in my opinion, I think it works in our favor.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. So I don't think it's a bad schedule. I mean, do I wish it was better at home? Yeah, I do. And that's one of the things that I think Joe Golding talked about. He wanted that Loyola Marymount game big time this year because that would have been a nice home game to go along with the tournament, and that would have been one of those non-conference games I think fans can look forward to. And you've got Tarleton State and Billy Gillespie. That's just going to be interesting because Billy hasn't been here in so many years. On that court with UTEP, that's something that I remember when he first got the job at Tarleton. We had him on the show, and he was lobbying to play UTEP that first season. Like he wanted to play the minors and was talking about that, and they couldn't get that thing scheduled. There was also talk about trying to get Tarleton State here for the West Star Don Haskins Sun Bowl invitation over the years. So the fact they were able to work that out and bring Gillespie back with his team, that's going to be a positive for fans and get a chance to see Gillespie.
Yeah, it's fun to see the program lean into that Billy Gillespie and UTEP connection and try to get fans engaged in that way. I really like it. I think it's going to work. It's going to work well for the Miners, and I'm excited.
Let me go to the phones right now. We've got Chuko on the lines. He wants to talk about the schedule. He joins us 505-6009. Hey, Chuko, how are you?
Hey, good afternoon, Steve. Doing good, and I really hope that fans show up for that game, welcoming back Billy Gillespie, and I'll tell you why. The guy made us believe in UTEP basketball again after the fiasco with Rabidou. I just give Gillespie so much credit for what he did, and it would be a nice thing to welcome him back.
Yeah, it would be. And based on the schedule and the way that game in particular falls, I mean, there's no reason why there can't be a nice turnout that night to see Gillespie's team come here. So, that's another thing. By the time they play, that'll be 5 days after the Louisville game. So you wonder, if the Miners have a strong start to their season, do well in Vegas, give a struggling Louisville a good run for their money, who knows what their record is at that point? We could get a really big home crowd out to see. It's a Monday night, December 16th. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
It should be. And again, I've been a big fan of his even after he left, so it'll be really nice to just see him in person again. There
you go. Other than that, I mean, you look at the schedule, takeaways. I think the Seattle game is going to be good here. I do. I'm looking forward to that. The tournament is going to be good also with the teams because they all were tournament teams last year. I mean, say what you want about Loyola Marymount. It kind of stinks that they're not coming. Kind of holds up the schedule a little bit for that extra home game. You get them next year, hopefully. But you know what? I feel like this is it's a winnable schedule for UTEP, and they'll have a chance.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for taking my call today, Steve.
Appreciate it, Chuko. Thanks for the call. Thanks for getting in. 14 past the hour as we continue. 505-6009. If you want to follow up and have any questions or comments on the schedule itself. By the way, Devin Barnes, who played at Tarleton, was talking to Adrian earlier today about that non-conference schedule for UTEP, what it's going to be like facing his former team. Here's what Devin Barnes had to say today.
It's been good. It's been real easy. You know what I mean? Like I said before, these guys are an easy group of guys to get along with. You know what I mean? As soon as I came in here, they welcomed me in the first day I came here. So it's been real easy and it's been real fun. So.
Non-conference schedule dropped today. Any early thoughts you're playing against your former team at Tarleton State?
That's a big game. It's pretty emotional because, Tarleton was kind of home for me at first, but now El Paso is my home. So, it's going to be emotional, but it's going to be a good time to compete with my guys to play with, and so it'll be fun.
And a chance to go to the West Coast and go to Vegas. That's a huge swing for you guys as well. It seems like that'll tell us a lot about this team, that late November stretch, right?
Right, it will. It's definitely a tough little stretch because, you're away from home for a long time. So, it just shows how tough we are mentally. But that's what we're doing now, preparing for all that type of stuff right now, doing practice, doing weights and all that. So, we'll be good.
Remember, they went to the Bahamas earlier in the summer, and that gave them a little extra chance to play together. And now they'll have that opportunity. And one game we didn't mention, but it's an exhibition game, and it's a big one. October 28th, the Pitt, Albuquerque, the New Mexico Lobos. Doesn't count in the standings, but that's the kind of game that I feel a lot of Miner fans might make the trip just because it's nostalgia. It's a good test for them. It's Richard Pitino and getting a chance to see how the Miners stack up with Lobos.
Yeah, and you know what? It's a team that saw the tournament last year, so I think it's something that UTEP really wants to measure itself up against a program like this, so it's going to be a great opportunity for them to do so. And I'm sure a lot of Miner fans are going to go up there and make the trip and try to make it a positive environment for the Miners.
Nick Whalen next as we continue here on Sports Talk. But first, let's go to Charlie 1 and get ourselves this traffic update. Right back here on Sports Talk, 20 past the hour as we continue. Normally, Jeff Erickson joins us from RotoWire at this time, but we have Nick Whalen who's going to be pinch hitting for him. But if you follow Jeff on RotoWire, you know they work together on the RotoWire YouTube channel, and they also have a podcast with each other that you could check out on SiriusXM, the YouTube channel, wherever you get your podcasts. So very happy to have Nick with us. And you can follow Nick on Twitter and X, and that is at Whalen, his last name, except you're not going to use the L. You're going to go WHA1EN. That's right. Nick got clever. Hey, you got to do what you got to do to make sure you can get these rare Twitter handles that aren't taken, right?
That's exactly right, Steve. And I can tell you just about every radio hit, every video hit that I've done over the last 10 years, I always feel bad for the host. It's a mouthful. I know. I always say it looks better written out than it does spoken. But, yes, I appreciate the pub. You can check out all of our podcasts on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. You can hear us on SiriusXM. And, of course, you can follow me on Twitter at WHA1EN. But looking forward to talking to fantasy football, man. And it's an honor to step in for Jeff.
Well, we appreciate you. We appreciate you being here. And again, because you guys have such a great rapport on that weekly podcast, I know we're going to have a great time with you. In fact, first week of the season was kind of an interesting one, to say the least. Man, some of the running backs looked terrific in week one. That was my big takeaway. I was not expecting Jordan Mason to run all over the Jets the way he did when we found out at the last minute that he was going to be replacing Christian McCaffrey. In fact, the controversy after the game Monday night, when he told the reporter that he knew Friday, and then, of course, Kyle Shanahan tried to correct it and said, no, that he was just probably telling you what, he was, talking. He thought about it. It wasn't the case. Look, we were saying, well, you know what the most embarrassing part about this is? It hurts the fantasy players more than anybody and the bettors, because they're the ones that would have loved to have known this on Friday instead of an hour before kickoff.
Oh, no question about it. I mean, this was a minor uproar in the fantasy football community on Monday night. No question about that. I saw somebody on Twitter say that it was the biggest inactive in the history of fantasy football, given the player, given the team, given the circumstances. I don't know if I'd go quite that far. I mean, obviously it's very frustrating, but the Niners didn't break any rules here, right? I think what it comes down to is just kind of bad luck for fantasy players because this was a Monday night game specifically. Had this just been a noon game on Sunday, it would have been surprising that Christian McCaffrey was out. There wasn't a whole lot of indication throughout the week that he was in danger of missing this game. But, everybody would have scrambled. You would have replaced Christian McCaffrey in your lineup. If you took him number one overall, you're probably not feeling great about your chances to win that matchup. But it would not have been the kerfluffle, if you will, that it was. But because it was the Monday night game, because, most people had already used up all their running back slots, if you didn't have Jordan Mason on your roster, you're kind of up a creek with no paddle. That's why it was such a big deal. I hope this blows over. I felt bad for Jordan Mason. He kind of tried to backtrack it after the game. You could tell it kind of ruined his spirit after such a huge game. And he said, well, this is why I don't talk to the media. There's a lot of frustration around the situation, but the Niners didn't break any rules here. They reported it at the time that they're supposed to, 90 minutes before kickoff. And, to their credit, I'm not trying to stand up for the man here in the NFL, but to their credit, they put Christian McCaffrey on the injury report earlier in the week. And they not only noted that he had a calf injury, but they noted the Achilles as well, which was a new addition to the report at the time.
Well, I'll say this. The way Mason played, I feel like 49er fans feel a whole lot better that if McCaffrey can't get back out for a while, at least it looks like right now they're in pretty good hands with that running game.
Yeah, no question about it. And I think there's a real chance that McCaffrey does not play this weekend. We already got some indication from that via Adam Schefter, who's on the telecast on Monday night. And, I think the 49ers will probably be a little more intentionally forthcoming this week with McCaffrey's status to avoid that media firestorm. There's some concern about McCaffrey playing on the artificial turf in Minnesota. I get that. But it makes you wonder about week 3, right? I mean, they're playing at the LA Rams in week 3. That is an artificial turf surface. He's dealing with this tendonitis in the Achilles. And as we know, that's something that can linger, especially for a running back who's, nearing age 30, a guy who had a ton of injury issues early in his career. And perhaps most importantly, a 49ers team that is singularly focused on the postseason, right? I mean, they proved pretty definitively on Monday night that they don't necessarily need Christian McCaffrey to beat good teams like the New York Jets, which is crazy to say, right? McCaffrey might be the best offensive player in the NFL, and the Niners have so much surrounding talent that, if you were just watching that game, you didn't know Christian McCaffrey was out, you wouldn't have even been able to tell, because that's how good Jordan Mason looked. And you have to like their chances certainly going to Minnesota, but I think Vikings fans are also feeling a lot better about their team coming out of week 1 against the Giants.
Yeah, let's talk about that right now with Nick Whalen, who's with us here on Sports Talk from RotoWire. I'll say this. Jeff knows this. He knows I am as biased as it gets. And every time I can get Jeff to give Aaron Jones a little love, I get excited about that. And I'm looking right now at the value meter to see where he has Jones slotted in this week. And it's all the way down to 24 because of what that Niners defense did to Breece Hall. At the same time, Aaron looked really good this past week running against that awful Giants defense, carved them up. And, what he had, I think it was about 16 carries, 94 yards, nearly a 100-yard game. And all of a sudden, I'm starting to think that, unlike Green Bay, Minnesota might give Aaron Jones ample carries and give him an opportunity to kind of be that workhorse running back that he never was with the Packers, despite all those years where he helped carry that team on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I'm coming to you from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Steve. So I've watched Aaron Jones very closely, throughout his tenure in Green Bay, and I can tell you it was a bittersweet divorce, right? Especially with Aaron Jones going to the Minnesota Vikings of all teams. I mean, he was one of the most beloved players on that roster for the last 5 or 6 years, but there was always that feeling in the back of your mind of, will Aaron Jones be available when it matters, right? And I think that's part of the reason that Green Bay ended up parting ways with Aaron Jones over a relatively small sum of money, when it came down to it, when you look at the contract that he signed with Minnesota. So, when you look at Jones from a fantasy perspective, I think everybody almost universally agrees. We love the player, right? I think Aaron Jones has been one of the most underrated running backs in the NFL throughout his career. I think his ability to kind of slip through tackles, shed tackles on the run, I mean, it's uncanny, really, because the measurables are nothing crazy. The speed is nothing crazy. He's just one of those guys that, really passes the eye test at a high level. But the reason that there's been a little bit of hesitancy to invest in him in fantasy is you just don't know when he's going to go down, right? You kind of have to pencil him in for 2, 3, 4 missed games, a couple more where he gets banged up and maybe he's only out there for half the time. But when Aaron Jones is fully healthy, I mean, I think he's one of the 10 to 12 best running backs in the NFL, and you can put him even higher on that list. With that said, I understand why Jeff has him at 24, which, you're still starting him in most leagues. I don't think you could completely just avoid the San Francisco defense, but we saw it with Breece Hall the other night, right? I mean, not only is it a concern about, Aaron Jones just going up against that defense, it's more about the game script overall, right? It's what if the 49ers are leading this game 23-7 at the half? How much Aaron Jones are we going to see over the course of 4 quarters? So I think part of that too, just kind of, it goes back to the overall skepticism of Sam Darnold and can he actually lead this offense? And we're going to find out, right? Because this is about as big of a contrast week 1 to week 2 as you're going to see. Getting Daniel Jones and the Giants in week 1, yeah, it's pretty easy to look good against that defense. We're going to find out a lot more about Minnesota on Sunday.
Yeah, you're totally right about that. By the way, Sam Darnold looked like the second coming of it was crazy when I watched him play. I'm thinking to myself, my God, this is the best he's ever looked. In fact, it was like Fran Tarkington out there minus the scrambling because he was completing every single pass and dicing up that Giants team, which brings us to the Giants right now and Daniel Jones. They looked like the worst team in football, and I don't know if they're going to be able to recover and turn this thing around.
Yeah, I think the Giants should be thanking the Carolina Panthers for doing what they did on Sunday, because I think if it weren't for the Panthers, the Giants would be the biggest definitive losers coming out of Week 1. And by the way, these teams do play each other later in the season in November. The Giants do take a trip down to Carolina, so we'll see if either of them have a win on the schedule at that point. But Daniel Jones, it feels like he's almost playing for his reputation, right? I mean, I don't know if he's going to lose this job. I mean, it's certainly possible, but it's not like they have a lot of great options behind him. They don't have, some young quarterback waiting in the wings. But, I mean, the city of New York is just kind of ready to prey on the downfall of Daniel Jones. And Week 1 could not have been more of a disaster, right? I mean, what we saw from him in the preseason when he really struggled, leaked into Week 1, that on paper looked like a winnable game for the Giants. So a lot of people were on the New York Giants to win that game outright. And, despite getting a big break on a fumble early on, I mean, the Giants could not get anything going offensively. Now you go to the Commanders this week, another fairly winnable game. Commanders are only a 1.5 favorite at home. You got a rookie quarterback in Jaden Daniels. I mean, this is the spot where Daniel Jones has to step up, right? If you lose this game, the schedule really stiffens up after this. They get the Browns, the Cowboys, the Seahawks, the Bengals, the Eagles, and the Steelers in their next 6 after this Commanders matchup. So, Week 1 tells us a lot about a lot of teams, but I think Week 2 is when you almost find out a little bit more. It's like, all right, were we overreacting? Were we underreacting to what we saw in Week 1? I think there's a ton of pressure on Daniel Jones. There's a ton of pressure on Brian Daboll as well. Maybe not necessarily to even win this game against the Commanders, but you cannot come out flat. You cannot do what you did last week against Minnesota. This, at the very least, you have to be competitive.
Nick Whalen with us right now from RotoWire, filling in this week for Jeff Erickson as we continue here on Sports Talk. Tough news if you drafted Puka Nacua high with that PCL sprain on the IR, so he's going to miss at least 4 games. On the flip side, Cooper Kupp, who was generally drafted below Nacua, now looks like the ultimate bargain. 21 targets in the overtime loss to the Titans, and all of a sudden you look at Kupp and you realize on Jeff's value meter, only CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill are higher than him at wideout. Looks like a great play, and now all of a sudden we could be seeing the same Cooper Kupp we saw here just a few years ago.
Yeah, no question about it. You mentioned the ADP, the average draft position for Cooper Kupp versus Nacua. I think Nacua was viewed as the safer option of the two, but as draft season went along, that gap between those two receivers got narrower and narrower and narrower. We started to see more people investing in Cooper Kupp. I saw him go early in round 2 in one of my final drafts before the season started. And yeah, I mean, obviously part of what we saw in Week 1 was because Puka Nacua went out of that game in the second quarter, but I mean, the almost like telepathy that Cooper Kupp has with Matthew Stafford is amazing to watch, right? I mean, the Rams were overmatched on Sunday night against Detroit in just about every area, and they led that game. I mean, they led that game midway through the fourth quarter solely because of that connection between Stafford and Cooper Kupp, and that was without an offensive line. I mean, the LA Rams had by far the worst pass protection of any team in the NFL in Week 1. Pro Football Focus puts out their grades each week. The Rams got a 20.4 for pass protection out of 100, 20.4. That is about 25 points worse than the next worst team. I mean, that would be my big concern for the Rams is how sustainable is that? Can you really live with this offensive line that's missing so many pieces? They signed a couple free agents off the street earlier today. They were able to get away with it against Detroit, but you could tell that's not how they wanted to play, right? It was Matthew Stafford, taking one step, looking at Cooper Kupp, and basically throwing it immediately. They couldn't get anything going down the field. With that said, part of the reason that Cooper Kupp is number 3 on Jeff's rankings this week, you get a great matchup against Arizona. And this is a team that Sean McVay has completely owned throughout his tenure with the LA Rams. Whoever the coach is for the Cardinals, it doesn't matter. Sean McVay just owns this franchise. The Cardinals generated a 3.5% pressure rate in Week 1 with their edge rushers. That is very, 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 very low. That may seem like a niche stat, but it matters. If you have a banged up, bad offensive line like the Rams do, the Cardinals are the team that you want to see on the schedule. So as long as Puka Nacua is out, it's going to be at least 4 games, and there's been some indication that it could be even longer than that. I mean, 21 targets a week, it's not going to be that high every week for Cooper Kupp, but 15 to 20 seems realistic. It really does.
Nick, let's talk about some receivers that struggled in Week 1, and if you think that this is going to be an issue, or will they be able to bounce back? Chris Olave is one, Drake London another. Brandon Ayuk, despite the Jets win, was not a factor. And, of course, Marvin Harrison, who everybody expected to be the number 1 target. We all saw the video of when he was wide open and for the touchdown and was never thrown to and did not get many looks at all for the Cards. Of those receivers, who are you concerned about most heading into these next few weeks?
Yeah, it's a good question. I will say I'm not worried about Olave. That was just a bizarre game. Saints are up, 30-3 at the half, just kind of a non-passing script in the second half, and, a little bit fluky that, it ended up being Foster Moreau and Jawan Johnson and Rashid Shaheed on the end of those receiving touchdowns. So I think Chris Olave will be fine when the Saints, play normal games, when they're not playing the Carolina Panthers. I'm a little concerned about Drake London, and it's not necessarily him. It's more about how Kirk Cousins looked in week one. And granted, that was a tough matchup against the Steelers defense that was very much ready to just go win that game in Atlanta. But I thought Kirk Cousins did not look very mobile. I didn't think he looked very confident. Falcons had one play, rushing or passing, go for 20-plus yards in week one. That is very concerning. They did not run play action on a single offensive play. That's something that Kirk Cousins has had a ton of success with throughout his career. That tells me that Kirk Cousins doesn't feel mobile enough to really do that on a consistent basis. So I think Drake London in the long term will end up being fine, but I don't know if there's going to be a big bounce back coming in week two on the road at the Philadelphia Eagles. I think that's actually a really tough spot for Atlanta this week. I think Ayuk will be totally fine. If he brings in that touchdown in the corner of the end zone, we're not talking about this. He looked a little rusty, as you'd expect, but he'll be just fine for the Niners. And Marvin Harrison, man, I mean, you start to watch some of those routes, you look at some of the speed metrics, he didn't look very explosive, right? I think it was a little bit more than, Kyler Murray, didn't see him out there. I don't know, man. I was not in on Marvin Harrison at cost. I'm not saying he's going to be a total bust, but when you're taking a wide receiver with the 13th or 14th overall pick in your fantasy draft, a rookie wide receiver, you're expecting 1,300 yards, 8, 9 touchdowns. That is a really, really high bar to clear. So obviously Marvin Harrison will be better than he was in week one going forward. There's nowhere to go but up. But in terms of what the rookie year upside is for him, I don't see this being a, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Odell Beckham type of rookie year.
You can follow RotoWire's Nick Whalen on Twitter and X at WHA1EN. It's like Whalen with the 1 instead of the L. And check him out at RotoWire.com for all the fantasy podcasts with Jeff Erickson on their not just Sirius XM fantasy show, but also on the RotoWire YouTube channel. All right, Nick, give me your favorite picks for week 2 for fantasy. Who are some of the guys that you feel are just great plays in fantasy?
Man, that's a good question. We got 16 games on the slate here. Tampa Bay and Detroit. I think that is the game I'm keeping a close eye on because we got the highest total of the week at 51.5. I don't think the Lions played all that well in week 1. I think they feel like they could do better. Obviously, Amon-Ra St. Brown gave you almost nothing, but I think this could be another big week for Jameson Williams. And I already have to eat crow on Jameson Williams because I was not a Williams guy during draft season. I was still skeptical. He looked the part of a vastly improved number 2 wide receiver, and he was out there for like 90% of the offensive snaps for the Detroit Lions. Buccaneers are down 2 of their starting defensive backs. They might be out. They might have 2 more, guys who are out in terms of depth pieces in that secondary. So I think this is going to be a really good spot for the Detroit passing game specifically. I think the Bucs can at least contain Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, but I think this will be a huge spot for Jared Goff. I have no problem starting him in this game. And, for Tampa Bay to keep up, if you think they're going to be competitive at Detroit, Chris Godwin is a guy who I really, really liked going into week 1. There's a lot of steam around him, throughout the preseason. They're moving him back into the slot. He absolutely lived up to that. Mike Evans is going to be the safer of those 2 guys. He's going to have more touchdown upside, but I think week to week, Chris Godwin is somebody that's going to be really, really productive. And, we talked about that Giants-Commanders game. If you got Jane Daniels on your roster, I think you got to start him this week. You absolutely have to start him. The way he was going off the board in fantasy drafts, you'd usually take Jane Daniels and maybe you back him up with a Tua or a Trevor Lawrence or a Justin Herbert or a Matthew Stafford. I think in this matchup at home against the Giants, you have to roll Jaden Daniels out there. Obviously didn't look great as a passer, a lot of short passes, a lot of checkdowns, a lot of throws to running backs and tight ends, but the rushing upside is already there, right? 16 carries in week 1, a lot of nice design runs. He only took 2 sacks. I thought he was really smart picking his spots, and that was against a pretty good Tampa Bay defense. I think this will be a much better matchup for Jaden Daniels this week.
Any players you want to avoid this week in fantasy that you just don't like the matchups, and even though they're normally guys you would play, you just don't have a good feeling about them?
Yeah, one guy I was really big on going into week 1 was Jackson Smith and Jigba for the Seattle Seahawks. Somebody I was comfortable starting as a flex in just about every spot. And the Seahawks are a team I'm very excited to watch this week, right? You talk about that week 1 to week 2 transition. I thought no team looked worse than Seattle in the first half, at least in week 1. They take 2 safeties, they throw a pick on their first possession, they muffed a punt inside the 10-yard line. So I think it's easy to say, oh, man, JSN, total bust in week 1. DK Metcalf didn't do anything. We'll see. It's a tough matchup on the road. You got to go cross-country to New England, a team that shut down the Bengals last week. But I'm backing off of JSN just a little bit. I think if Seattle can avoid those obvious critical mistakes that essentially cost them like 4 possessions early in the game, I think we see a different script here. But the Patriots are not necessarily a plus fantasy matchup, right? They're a team that you feel good about getting a win against, but I think this is a team that's going to play really hard defensively. Most of their talent is on the defensive side of the ball. There's a reason the total in that game is only 38.5. So, not backing off any of my preseason Jackson Smith and Jigba takes, but I don't necessarily love this matchup for him to get back on track. And then you look at that Jets-Titans game, you got to think the Jets defense is going to play better this week, right? I mean, they got embarrassed by the 49ers. If you were on the Jets, as a lot of people were on Monday night, the thought was, all right, this defense is going to win them this game, right? They have a quarterback finally, but you're not expecting the Jets to go put up 30 points every week. The idea is that this could still be one of the best defenses in the league. Maybe that's just how good the 49ers are, but they are in a much better spot this week. You got a mistake-prone quarterback in Will Levis. So trying to choose between Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears this week, that's a little bit dangerous for me going up against this Jets defense. If you have to go one or the other, I would certainly go Pollard. But if you have a better running back option who has a more advantageous matchup, that's maybe a start sit that I would think about.
Good stuff from Nick Whalen today here on Sports Talk. Check out rotowire.com. Jeff's value rankings for week 2 are up on the main page. You can also get great stories on WNBA. There's even fantasy basketball auction values. They're getting ready for the NBA season with that. Major League Baseball, golf, college football. It's all up there. You guys have everything. NASCAR, soccer. Doesn't matter what sport you play. RotoWire's got it all.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you kind of directing everybody, toward our site. It's not just football, right? I mean, that's the focus this time of year, but we are, 5 weeks away from the start of the NBA season. We got WNBA playoffs picking up. If you can play fantasy for a sport, if you can gamble on a sport, I can assure you we have coverage for it.
Good stuff. All right, rotowire.com/free. Get a peek behind the paywall. Check it out. And once you like it, folks, you'll get a chance to be a regular like we are every week here with our great team from RotoWire. Enjoyed it, Nick. Thanks so much for the time, and look forward to having you back on the show.
Hey, absolutely, man. This was fun. Thanks for having me.
He's Nick Whalen as we continue. We'll come back. John Teicher next from Dead Beach, getting ready for UTEP football with Scotty Walden. It's coming up top of the hour right here, 600 ESPN El Paso. Final countdown here on Sports Talk as we wind things up on what has been a busy show today, 9/11. By the way, I want to wish my mom a happy birthday, celebrating a birthday today. Wayne Thornton celebrating a birthday today also. So happy birthday, Wayne. Happy birthday, Mom. And with that, let's send it back out to Dead Beach Brewery. Get ready for John Teicher, who's standing by with UTEP football with Scotty Walden, about 10 minutes away from the brewery. John, good to have you back. I know you are not celebrating a birthday today, but like a lot of us can probably remember very well where you were 23 years ago. When again, one of the probably the worst attack ever on our soil happened with 9/11.
As I recall, Steve, and you probably remember this as well. I think the Miners were going to play the Red Raiders of Texas Tech during the week of 9/11.
That's correct. That is correct.
Obviously, it transpired, and the game ended up being canceled.
Never rescheduled, John.
Right.
Never rescheduled.
Exactly. So, obviously it was the middle of the week, so I was getting ready for work when everything transpired, and the whole world changed. Obviously, the way we fly has changed, and everything has changed. So, yeah, the world has changed so much over the last quarter century since 9/11.
You know what's ironic about that moment that you brought up was the year before, Gary Nord had taken the Miners to a bowl game. The team was, I believe, poised to have a big season in 2001, and they had their first game in Albuquerque against the Lobos, and it was not a good particular game at all for UTEP. But people were excited about the rebound coming up with Texas Tech and the opportunity to try and avenge that first loss. And then all of a sudden came the attack, and the cancellation, and it was never the same for Gary Nord and the Miners after that cancellation.
Well, as you'll recall, Steve, that 2000 team was the Western Athletic Conference champion, the only WAC championship that UTEP ever won in football, and they had a senior-laden team that Charlie Bailey had largely built and turned over to Gary Nord and his staff, and they lost a ton of those guys to graduation following that 2000 season. So there were a lot of newer and more inexperienced faces on that 2001 team than certainly the Miners had during their WAC championship campaign of 2000.
I know you're going to talk a lot to Scotty today on the show about the game and the game coming up with Liberty and how that's going, but putting it in perspective crowd-wise, 41,000 plus. I thought the turnout was terrific. It's again given an opportunity to put 40,000 plus in against an FCS opponent that a lot of fans were expecting a win against. That didn't happen, but still the turnout, the Sun Bowl, it really was. It was great to see it so full for the first time in a while to start the year.
Steve, it was the largest crowd that an FCS, that a group of five school has had over the first 2 weeks of the season. That is a tribute to the folks of El Paso and to Miner fans. There are even some Power 4 conference schools that didn't draw the way the Miners drew this past Saturday over the first 2 weeks of the season. Among them, Minnesota and Rutgers had smaller crowds than the 41,600 plus. The Miners drew against, as you say, an FCS opponent in southern Utah last week. So that's a tremendous feather in the cap to the sports fans of this community.
We tried to think back on Monday's show, the last time the Miners won a game at the Sun Bowl where there were 40,000 plus in attendance. And some of our listeners had pointed out that it was Houston, and I believe that was probably around the Mike Price era when they had that large a crowd and did it. But I was trying to think if we've seen anything recently in the last 17, 18, 19 years where we've had that large a crowd and the Miners were able to pull out a win.
No, I think it probably was Houston because, again, this was only the third time since 2008 that UTEP has had a crowd of 40,000 or more attend a game in the Sun Bowl Stadium. So, yeah, you probably have to go back to 2006, 2005, maybe 2007 to find the last time the Miners played a game with over 40,000 in attendance and actually won the game in the Sun Bowl.
Unreal. All right, well, listen, have a good show here, top of the hour. We'll talk to you in a moment. John Teicher getting ready for UTEP football with Scotty Walden coming your way live from Dead Beach Brewery. It's next right here, 600 ESPN El Paso.